All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Angela, Reverend Angela, and I will be speaking today about self-compassion. I'm kind of on this self-compassion kick. And, some of you may remember a few months ago when I last spoke, it was about self-compassion as well. And so we're going to just go ahead and dive into it. So I was recently listening to kind of a little workshop that Chris Germer gave. He's with what is it, the mindful, let me hold on, the Center for Mindful Self Compassion. And it's a really good site. Chris Germer and Kristen Neff has done a lot of work around self compassion, self forgiveness. And and so this is kind of based on, their talk with some of my stuff thrown into. So they were suggesting that there's two aspects to self-compassion, being a tender quality and a fierce quality. Uh, and this goes hand in hand with what I was speaking about a few months ago of empathy and action being the components that comprise compassion. So I think that those go well together, empathy being pretty tender and then action being fierce. And so with tenderness, there's a spaciousness, there's comforting and validation. Um, and so when thinking about tenderness, I was reminded of a couple of my family members. And I invite you to do the same. Maybe you have like a family member like mine, where this is not the definition of tenderness, the first one, but my grandfather, he was a lovely man, and he meant well. But every time he saw me, which wasn't often, I guess he was so excited, I don't know, he would clench my shoulders, like, hey, how you doing? And that made my body just like, whoa, it was really, it wasn't very tender. and, and it created tension and rigidity in my body. And so, whereas though I had a grandmother who I also didn't see very much, but when I did see her, she was so loving in her tone of voice. It was so warm and welcoming. And when I heard her voice, it just allowed my body to soften and melt and relax. It felt safe. And so, again, maybe you have some examples of these, family members in your own family. But when we're thinking of tenderness, it's not just what we say to ourselves, the content of what we're saying, but it's our approach to ourselves. Are we are we being soft and soothing in our speech to ourselves, our inner voice? Are we taking those slow, deep breaths and inviting rest into our body? And so, remembering, I guess, that, our way of being isn't only in our mind. It's our mind and our body united, by our breath. And so that's my yoga though coming out. But implementing, our body as well to facilitate that more integrated or embodied approach to tenderness. And Kristen Neff specifically, I guess, has identified like three components that go into kind of that tender self-compassion, and then Chris Germer added some body movement. And I'd like to practice that with you today. You can do it seated. It's with our hands. But so basically, they're saying that the components of that tender self-compassion are made of mindfulness. So having kind of that wider perspective, kind of zooming out, seeing the broader perspective without judgment. And so they're saying it's kind of like with the open hands. And so I invite you to maybe take the hands out in front of you as if you're kind of offering a gift, and maybe close the eyes and just see how this body posture feels in you right now, to have the palms open and in front of your body, being receptive and open, taking a deep breath in and then releasing fully on the exhale. The next component is common humanity. So knowing that we're not alone, that other people, have experienced similar to us. And so the hand or the body expression would be wrapping ourselves in a hug. And so I invite you to do this. And so notice, with, your arms wrapped around your chest, how this feels. Again, taking a moment to maybe close the eyes and notice how this feels in the body. Notice maybe the temperature and the pressure of your hands against your shoulders. Feeling held by ourselves and by all of humanity. Taking a deep breath in and then releasing, sighing it out. And then the final component would be self-kindness. Being gentle and understanding with ourselves. And the gesture for this is hands over heart. So again here, maybe placing the hands over the heart, feeling into the movement of your heart beating, feeling the temperature of the hands against the chest. Are your hands cool or warm? Allow the chest and the body to melt kind of under this protective, loving kindness that we're offering to ourselves. And then take a deep breath in and sigh it out. And then you can rest your hands gently down and just take note of how those types of somatic expression felt within your body and your mind. And then yes, like recalling maybe those loved ones, those friends, family, that when you're in their presence, you feel like a letting down, like a relaxing, a release, a softness in the body, and that's kind of what we're aiming for with ourselves too, is to really approach ourselves in that same gentle, kind way. And so then the second aspect is that fierceness, and that goes hand in hand with the action component of self-compassion, is that it's a motivating action. It's protective. It's like the mama bear, protecting her cubs kind of a thing. And so again, this is, it's not just a quality of mind, but it's body as well. And so an example, like a personal example that I've experienced a few months ago was, for some reason, I don't know why exactly, but I got mocked for my undergraduate degree being in French. I don't know, it was weird, but they were really treating me poorly about it. And I mean, it kind of deteriorated. It went downhill, but but initially though, I took a firm stance. Like my body was activated, I guess. Like I stood up taller. I took a wider kind of stance with my feet, creating more stability and support within my body. Not that I know I'm doing like punching, but I wasn't going to do anything like that. But it was this fierce energy that was rising up in me of, no, you're not, I'm not going to allow you to ridicule me. And then my tone of voice shifted as well, to reflect this kind of this motivating kind of energy of protective fierceness. And so that kind of, that was an example of an outward, like a person outside of me ridiculing. But we also ridicule ourselves, at times, and be very harsh with ourselves and self-critical, criticizing, and so we still need to, I guess, we need to approach ourselves in that same way, not from a foundation of anger or hatred, but of love for ourselves. Why? Like, I deserve better than this. I'm not going to allow myself to ridicule myself, because, I'm worth more than that. And so it's kind of, it's from that loving, though, foundation, just like a parent, if their kid is running out into the street, a parent, is like, like gets pretty fierce with them, and pulls them back. And it's not because they hate them. It's the opposite. It's because it's out of love. It's out of protection. And so the same for us. And so those movements is, so it's called, so say no to harm. So you can put your hand like over your heart and then press your palm out, so it's a no. So you can practice that with me if you want. You can say no. um, like a stop, stop. And if you're standing, you can even take like a qigong kind of stance. If you're aware of that, it's kind of like a wider kind of stance with your feet, and you're bent a little bit into the knees. And so that way, it's again that kind of sturdiness of stance, like you're not going to be pushed over. So that's helpful with external type forces, but also for ourselves, of like, no, come on, Angela, quit. Like, I deserve better than this. And then there's this, like a yes, yes, I am taking what is good and positive and amazing, in. So it's like I'm sweeping it and pulling it into my heart center. I'm worthy and I matter. So so that's a, like a, yeah, you're just. And if you really like visualization too, that can be really cool. I'm not the best at visualization, but like if you visualize like all like the sparkly, like beautiful, like awesome energy and stuff, and you visualize you're pulling it into your heart center and saying yes. Okay. And then actively encourage yourself, like I can do it. So like whether it be with like little thumbs up, or like this, like Norman does in our morning sangha, whatever it is, like, yeah, cheer yourself on. My son used to take little social classes. He has autism, and at the end of every little session, the teacher would say, "You can do it." And so I always visualize that little voice, "You can do it," And so, just give yourself that encouragement. And so, anyway, so both aspects of tenderness and fierceness are important to have, and to have a balanced relationship of self compassion with self. And so you know I invite you to experiment, with these different components of, that fierce protection and the tenderness, and really touch into how it makes the body feel and how it shifts your own energy. And yeah, so we have a few minutes before meditation. If you would like to share any thoughts or anything at all, you're more than welcome to.
Reverend Angela, thank you. Wonderful presentation. I adore Kristen Neff's work. This was a gift from an extremely thoughtful person. I'm going to hold it as still as I can, hoping everyone can read it.
Yeah.
Compassion for self is part of compassion for all. And that's a quote from the great Buddha himself.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Yes, thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. Anybody else? Y'all can just jump in if you want to share anything or okay. Well, we can go to our meditation. Let's see. Um, okay.